Alright, so, gonna be going over what exactly I did to this. This is my Galaxy's Edge Legacy lightsaber. It is the Asajj Ventress. It is from the first run of Legacy Sabers. It has since been discontinued, so it's no longer being made and is no longer in production. It's basically just been vaulted. It's kind of the way that Disney likes to refer to like when they stop producing things. When I purchased it, it was actually already damaged. It was missing the ignition button. Still worked, was still fully functional. But I decided to go ahead and go a few steps further and fully modify it. I've already done this previously with the Darth Maul Legacy Saber as well. It still retains the factory Galaxy's Edge mounting system. So the blade and everything still pops in like a normal GE blade. But the actual electronics are all completely different. The blade itself also was modified. I'll kind of go over that a little bit in this video again, but again, my previous Darth Maul build kind of explains what I did with that blade. So here kind of is a rundown of what all it took to build the saber. I tried to record as much as I could. A lot of it I kind of just got sucked into doing, and quite a bit of it just honestly was too hard to record. You're soldering on little tiny pads with very thin wire, and unfortunately, unless I'm like zoomed in on my hands, kind of hard to see what's going on. But I'll at least kind of go over what it took to build and the parts and stuff that I used for it. Alright, so I kind of started off with trying to figure out how I wanted the internal chassis to hold the board. Because I needed the soundboard to be quote-unquote flat inside of the chassis or parallel with the blade. So I needed to make sure that because of the way that the internal chassis was and the space that I was going to be able to fit the board, I had to design this little angled kind of pocket basically that would sit inside the internal chassis right about where the factory board would sit, but it still kept it at a nice even level with the blade, so that when I had to navigate the menu or when I tried to use any of the twist on or twist off features, it would still activate correctly. And I wouldn't have to worry about twisting the blade weird or anything like that. I went through a couple of different tries, a couple of different prototypes. None of them really seemed... They were all like fairly close, and I did come up with a final design. I also then designed and printed a couple of battery holders. I designed these to fit a pre-made 18650 battery terminal or battery cup. So it already has the terminals on it. All they would have to do is just slide that battery holder into this chassis, and then that would take care of mounting the 18650. And then it does have the pocket for the 28mm speaker located on the end. Now, as I stated previously, I am using a Golden Harvest V3 board. I really like the feature set on this board. The LED control is not as crazy as like the Profi or some of the CFX ones, but the price point for this board is fantastic. Okay, after I got the wiring done for the hilt side of the connector for the blade, or the hilt side connector to the blade, I then went ahead and pre-tinned all of the contact pads that I was going to be using for the Golden Harvest V3. It's really important that you kind of do some of these steps. It makes soldering a lot easier. Pre-tin the board, pre-tin the wires, and then you really only need to add a little bit more solder to the connection once you start to attach the wires and everything. This way you're not like overly heating up the board, and you don't have to like try to dollop a whole bunch of solder onto the pads and the wire all at the same time. This makes basically just heating them up, they'll connect to each other, and then saves a lot of time and energy. And then you can kind of see the board, the little balls of solder on top of all the contact pads. Nice and clean, none of them are bridged. That's another thing to kind of be careful of with with how small this board is. You want to have a very fine tip for the soldering iron. It does allow you to get a more precise point of heat on the contact pads, and then you don't have to worry about like potentially burning out components on it, and you don't have to worry about pads connecting to each other and becoming shorted out. Okay, and now we are moving on to kind of all of the a lot of the work that went into it. I'm just gonna wind up like speeding through most of this, but I took the factory blade mounting point, desoldered all the wires off of it, added my own wires to the board, so that I would have, it's a little bit thicker gauge wire, and a little bit more flexibility with those wires. Plus, with the way that I had cut them off, there wasn't any length left to them, so I couldn't attach them to the Golden Harvest. Once I got the blade connector put together, I did kind of cross-reference and double check my Darth Maul to make sure it all matched up correctly. At some point, I will probably save the design or save the actual pinouts in case anybody in the future wants to do them. Okay, so once I got the board kind of ready to go for soldering the rest of the wires on, I then began to get the hilt side of the connector for the blade together. I got the wires pre-tinned, and then I proceeded to attach them to the board. Now, there is a full wiring diagram for this board whenever you buy it. And you can kind of look up how to go about wiring this board to the way that suits you depending on your usage case. I'm just using a single LED blade, and it is a LED lit blade, not a base lit style saber. So for me, I have a data line that runs to the LEDs, and then I have a ground that comes off of the connector. The ground gets bridged across the 3 LED ground wires or grounding pads on the board, and then there's a data line that connects to the board. The data line obviously sends what color and information to the board. The power wire is not connected to the board. The power is going to be connected directly to the battery. So you ground the ground cable to the 3 ground pads. You then connect the data cable to the data pad, and then the power wire will get attached to the power coming off of the battery directly. So once you get past this point, then kind of showing off going over getting the battery chassis ready. I attached my 2 power cables to the battery, and then the 1 ground to the battery chassis, that is. So you have 1 power wire that runs into the board. You have a 2nd power wire that runs to the hilt chassis or hilt side of the blade connector, and then the ground connects to the board itself. The battery basically sends power to both the LED and the board. The board, however, is what activates it. So you don't have to worry about the LEDs draining power off of the battery, because they won't pull any power until they get a data signal. And then you have a, for the most part, wired up board. There is the speaker connection as well. There's a plus and minus. It doesn't actually matter with the way that these speakers are built. There is technically no plus or minus for the speaker connection on the board. It might have it listed there, but every time I built it, I think with my maul I mounted it one way, and then I just copied it for the Asajj. But I don't think there's any sort of plus or minus on the Golden Harvest itself. The speakers will have a plus and minus for it, but honestly, these speakers are so small that the way they operate is a little bit different than like a normal full-size speaker. So the Golden Harvest kind of just sends a signal to it, and I haven't had any issues with mine. So I don't think too many other people have had issues with theirs. So yeah. Now, once it's most of the way wired up, then we move on to how it gets mounted into the chassis. Now I did decide to go ahead and do a test run on it, make sure that everything was working before I tried to put it into the chassis. Plugged the battery in, it went through a firmware update real fast. Once the update was applied, it was pretty much ready to go. Now I wound up wiring this as a 2-button setup, but forgot to change it in the settings. You can kind of see what happens in a little bit here. So I hit the power on, and it makes the noise. It sounds decent. It sounds better in the chassis. They always do. But then when I go to try the second button, it does not work. That's because the Golden Harvest can be operated with a single button or with a 2-button setup. The 2-button setup makes navigating the menu a little bit easier, but if your saber isn't able to accommodate the second button, you don't really have to worry about it. You're not necessarily at a disadvantage, because you can still navigate the menus, you can still go through all of the settings, you can still activate all of the effects with just a single button. I have it as a 2-button setup in this clip, but I actually, since assembling it, removed the second button, and I'm running just a single button for my setup, just because it was a little bit cleaner and a little bit easier to run the wires and stuff through the chassis. I didn't really go over that in any of the videos, and I don't think I have any clips of it recorded that way, but just know that that's the way that it is set up in mine. Okay, so from that point ran the challenge of me reassembling the saber. I actually had to go back into it a couple of times to shave down the internal chassis, the factory internal chassis, and shave it down slightly just to be able to accommodate the battery pack and so that it actually fit correctly. I had to finagle the wiring a little bit, and halfway through is when I kind of decided that I was okay with not having the dual button compared to my maul. The maul was easy enough to just drill an additional hole into. This one I wasn't going to be able to do that, so you see me a little bit later kind of struggling and fighting with the 2-button setup, and so finally that's why in the final version of it I am running just a single button. I don't miss having the second button. I have played with it quite a bit since fully assembling it. I did swap out the factory screws for some M3 like cap style screws. I was having issues with the Phillips and flathead ones, so I just went with the machine screws. They were a little bit nicer. I do have to adjust the like beauty cap for them, the little cap that hides them, because it doesn't quite fit anymore because the machine screws are a little bit taller. But yeah, a little bit of tape held the speaker in just fine. Still plays, still sounds great. They are louder than the factory Legacy's blades, and they can get almost 2 to 3 times louder, but then you run into a little bit of distortion with the blade. So I don't run it quite that loud. I run it probably about the same volume as the factory one, but you do, with the Golden Harvest, have smooth swing, and some of the effects and things like that are a lot more precise and noticeable compared to the original. I wish I had some footage of the original one. I could probably try to find them, but if you look up reviews of them, a lot of people basically kind of have the same general consensus of the Galaxy's Edge ones are cool. The details on them are nice, but they're nicer lightsabers on the market using the kind of hardware that I used for this. So for me, it was more so I love the chassis and I like having it. I like the blade mounting system. I just wanted the little bit more out of it. And that's why I kind of went through the whole process of converting both my Darth Maul and now the Asajj Ventress. Okay, so after everything gets reassembled, we are now at this point here with the fully assembled Asajj Ventress saber. I do still need to finish up the button mounting and print a new replacement button or find a replacement button cover to go on the Switch, but it is basically 95 to like 98% done. It's still, where did I do? Retains the original Galaxy's Edge mounting system, as I pointed out. I like the mounting system, and I'll probably say that over and over again. It's convenient, it's nice. You don't have to deal with set screws and stuff like that some of the other like more custom sabers on the market are. Now, the great thing about the Golden Harvest is that you have gesture controls built into it, as well as button controls. So, button turns it on. Some of the little blaster effects, your hits and blocks, and then hold the button, and it powers off. The gesture controls are great. So again, kind of as I was explaining about how I wanted to make sure that the board was parallel with the blade, because it meant that whenever I use the gesture controls, such as the twist on and the twist off, I wasn't having to rotate the blade and rotate the hilt in kind of like a weird fashion. I did a test install on this a long time ago before I actually modified the Darth Maul, and the way that the board kind of sat in there, it just sort of flopped around, and so the gesture controls didn't really work. Some of the effects were kind of off, so this is a much more refined and fully built, finished kind of version of that early test run. Super happy with it. It is a little difficult to get in to the SD card to be able to add new fonts. I would love at some point to create probably a slightly different battery system, perhaps with like contact pads, so that I can then also put like the USB seedling module in there. I may figure that out all later on down the road, but for now, the preloaded fonts that are on here are fantastic, and I did load a couple of other additional fonts that I enjoyed off of it. At some point, once I kind of amass and collect like a whole group of fonts that I really enjoy, then at that point those will kind of be the defaults that I put on here. But for now, it's fantastic. SaberTech did an amazing job with this board. All the designers for the original fonts did a great job with them. They sound fantastic. The effects are great, and I have no complaints with them. This is a single button. My Maul is a two button or dual button. A main power and auxiliary. In the case of this one, I didn't really feel the need to have the second button because basically I just wanted it to power on red and have a little bit more of a crackling and kind of unstable effect, whereas the Maul kind of follows a more traditional Maul style / the Maul one I could kind of go and mess with and kind of set to do whatever. This one I wanted to keep kind of more in line of what Asajj had, so very happy with it. I'm going to be doing some reworking of the Darth Maul. I don't know that I'll do a full in-depth video on what all I am going over. I'm just basically making the battery easier to put in and out, because currently right now the battery and the soundboard chassis is all attached to original chassis pieces, so I have to literally pull the entire thing out in order to put the battery in. And I'm going to create it to be a little bit more similar to this, where I just have a bit of extra power wire in here so that I can kind of just pull the battery tray out, pop the battery in, and then slide it back. I'm going to be doing a similar system to that one, but I don't know that I'll really document or do a full in-depth video like this one. So that's pretty much it. I'm probably going to throw up a couple of video clips of a little bit more of kind of showing off the saber, showing off kind of the sound profile of it, showing what the blade and stuff looks like, both in kind of a lit environment, and show off kind of what the blade looks like in a low light environment. It looks really cool. The replacement LEDs that I did for this, there are probably I want to say probably 3 times the amount of LEDs compared to the original Galaxy's Edge blade in here. The effects are a whole lot smoother, the ignition's a whole lot smoother, and overall just a lot brighter and nicer color out of it. That's kind of one of the nice things about doing the custom ones versus the plain stock Galaxy's Edge blades, is that they're nice, but they're just not up to the same standard as like custom saber builders out there. So by replacing everything in here, I have a much nicer, brighter blade while still maintaining the mounting system that I enjoy. And it's kind of fun whenever I go to the parks, because I'll take the saber. I haven't taken this one out, but my Darth Maul, you'll have cast members and other people that own Galaxy's Edge blades see me pop in a Galaxy's Edge blade, but then I go and ignite it, and it's got like the Eye of Sauron effect, or it's got this crazy like ignition startup and funky sound fonts and stuff like that. So, and people all of a sudden are like, "Oh, that's not like mine at all," and it's like, no, it's not. So people get kind of excited whenever they see that, and hopefully at some point more people will start to modify them. They are pricey, and in the case of the Asajj, because it's no longer in production, the value on it kind of skyrocketed very quickly. You can't find one for any less than like $600 or $700, and I saw listings upwards of almost $2,000 for 2 of them together. So it's kind of crazy that once these go out of production, their value just skyrockets. Everybody wants them. Collectors that weren't able to get a hold of them are trying to track them down. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what people think once I take this one out, because the people that know this one know just how actually kind of rare it is now at this point. So that's everything for right now. Enjoy the couple of clips of me showing off the saber, and maybe I'll do an in-depth video on the Darth Maul at some point soon.